Hello, you dear listener and English learner. Welcome to our podcast. Be our guest, please sit down, relax, chill out, whatever you call it. Take up whatever you need to focus and relax. I don't know, cup of tea, coffee, beer, popcorn, I don't know. But just be welcome, and I'm here. My name's Rodrigo, first of all, and I'm gonna be your guest for today. And actually, I would like to introduce our topic right away, straight away in the beginning of the episode. And what is it that we're going to be talking about today with you guys? I'm going to be bringing three exceptional, in my opinion, exceptional tips for you who's learning English, who's been studying, and who wants to be fluent in English one day in the future, right? And these tips, I didn't necessarily follow them while I was learning English, and I really wish I would, follow them. So I'm bringing it to you today, and I really hope you make good usage of it in the future. And without further ado, let's jump into them right away. Tip number one, I call it study every day. Okay. But it's just a name, just a facade, basically. Because when I say, and when we teachers and when we learners of languages say study every day, we don't necessarily mean study every day. What we actually mean is be in contact with the language every single day, or make every effort you have in your body, in your mind, to at least have a little bit of contact with the language every single day. Okay, because there are scientific studies indicating and presenting in very clear in an objective way that our brain works from daily usage, basically, with things. Actually, daily, what I mean usage, I mean daily approach with information, whatever this information is, basically. And here we're talking about information regarding to the language you're learning, the language you want to learn. Okay, so putting it in simpler terms, it's going to be kind of useless if your brain, aka your attention, your focus, your consciousness, won't be in contact with the language like on a daily basis. But I like to be a little more specific here. When I say on a daily basis, actually it means in a certain space of time, basically. Be that every other day, yeah, but be consistent. Of course, every single day is way better than every other day. All right, but yeah, be so. The thing is, it is much better studying, or as I said, having contact with the language like 5 minutes every single day than like 3-4 hours once a week. I'm not gonna get into the details and specifics about these studies. If you just Google and put some research online into it, you're gonna find it. And of course, this is not the focus of this conversation here, this chat here, right? But the point is, this is how our brain works. Okay, for everything, Take, for example, hard words, unusual words. Say, for example, disease words. Yeah, you didn't hear me wrong. I said disease names they used to be very unusual, and yet in a couple of weeks, everyone has memorized them. Yeah, like even from you to your 5-year-old nephew to your grandparents. Everyone and haven't you ever wondered, like, why? How is it possible that we, don't memorize like simple words, quote unquote simple, at least simple compared to more, complex words like disease words, disease names, sorry. And yet everyone memorizes. There's a very, very objective and simple reason why. Is it because it's online? It's like, I mean, it's out there all the time. Everyone is talking about it. TV, radio, all the communication means are talking about it constantly, you know? So we just get to memorize them, these words, okay? So there's a secret to memorize words, you know? When you say like, I don't memorize words, okay, there are multiple factors that can cause it, of course. I'm not saying this is the only thing, but I can guarantee with 100% it is because you're not bringing the word, the target word, so to say, to your zone of attention, or even better, to your zone of actions, you know, like you're not bringing it to your routine, you know, in a constant way, right? So you have to figure out a way to be talking to people, right? First of all, if you don't have anyone to talk to, you can talk to yourself. We can have a whole conversation about this very topic here, but let's just move forward. But talk somehow, you know, just someone, yourself included, if necessary. Of course, it's not, I wouldn't put it as a first option unless you're a really introvert person, but yeah, that's probably not the case. And of course, put a lot of, not put a lot, but have a lot of audio input, you know. When I say audio input, I mean movies, I mean podcasts, I mean videos, YouTube videos, you know, music, of course. But make sure you're constantly listening to the language, you know. Some people say, well, I love movies and I'm still learning English. I want to understand the movie. I don't want to learn English. I mean, if I can do both, okay, but I can, you know. And they're right. They're not wrong. Like, you don't, if you really, really love a movie, if you really, really want to watch a movie, watch it first, you know. We have a very cultural problem here that is watching dub movies, right? Here in Brazil, where I'm from, and where I am right now, by the way. And this causes big problems to all of us because we don't get exposed to the language, the English language, right? That causes a lot of pronunciation problems, you know. Our generation, the early 30s, people who are in their early or late 30s, not so much, but people like 40-year-old or more or over, you know, the 40, early 40s or late 40s or even older people have real trouble because they grew up practically not even listening to a single word in English. I mean, a word pronounced by a native speaker, of course. There's always words in English all around, but you know, without the native speakers audio input, you know, directly or indirectly. When I say directly, I mean like some foreigner talking to you, you know. I would say that for older people, older quote unquote, of course, right? But people who are older than 40 or even 45, I would say, it was probably much more likely that they came across a gringo, quote unquote, like someone from the States or from England, while growing up, rather than things like from TV, you know. This generation of the 40 people who are in their early or late 40s today have had a lot of contact with TV and radio, you know. But even though there isn't much except for music, but music's a different story. It's very useful, as I said. It's one of the options for audio input, but it's a little different, okay? I don't know if I'm gonna pick it up further on this conversation, but let me just move on, okay? So make sure you have contact with the language every day. When I say study every day, I mean make sure you have contact with the language every single day, all right? And this is tip number 1. Okay, so tip number 2 goes, combine business and pleasure, okay? This is a very popular expression, but yet very useful, very interesting in order for us to make progress with things that we need to do, or things we need to learn, things we need to be in contact with. And it's way better doing, you know, whatever it is that we have to do with things that we somehow enjoy doing, as opposed to something we really, really have to do, and we don't find any kind of pleasure doing it. Okay, so yeah, that's it, right? During the tip number 1 here, I brought a lot of examples of things that you can use in order to combine business and pleasure. And by business, I say practicing English, right? Learning English. And you could pretty much use, and I really recommend you pretty much use all of them, right? From music, movies, TV shows, interviews, YouTube's there, right? 20 years ago, when people had to learn English, when people would learn English, they had a really, really, I wouldn't say hard mission, but way harder than it is for us these days. Okay, with just a couple of clicks, we have like Barack Obama talking in front of us for a couple of hours, or George Clooney or Michael Jackson, So my point here is, like, do things that do fun things, and learn while you're doing them, right? I could also add here video games, right? Problem is, the video games these days in Brazil are stumbling up, on the problem I brought up during the first part of this episode. That is dub movies, right? My generation, again, the early 30s, early 40s, late 30s. We grew up playing video games that were very simple. In what I mean is that they were so simple there was no translation, right? So everything was in the original language, and 99 out of 100 times it was English. This language was English. Okay. These days everything's dubbed. Okay. I'm not criticizing. I have absolutely nothing against it. That's cool. That's fair. But when it comes to learning English, right? Well, I don't have a PS4 or 5, but I am pretty much sure that there must be, if you're listening to me right now, you just let me know somehow. But I am pretty much sure that there must be a way to keep the game in the original language, isn't it? Yeah, most likely, right? So video games are cool, but make sure you keep them in English, right? Of course, if this is what you're learning, right? So you're having fun and you're learning English at the same time. And yeah, you will be learning, okay? If you're in contact with the language, you will be learning, all right? Watching movies, okay? Make sure you watch every movie from now on in English, okay? Unless you're really, really basic, but make sure you watch with, I don't know, there are a couple of tips as far as movies go, regarding the level you are when you're studying. So if you're very basic, I don't know, there might be, you might disagree with me, but that's fine. But I wouldn't say that it is so interesting, so productive to watch the whole movie in English without subtitle, for example. Like, just like, jumping into it, like, hey, let's keep it real. For a very basic, for a very, very elementary beginner student, well, I'm not so sure if that would be my option, okay? But on the other hand, you can take like your favorite scene in that movie, put up some subtitles, right? First of all, in Portuguese, so you make sure you understand what's going on, and second, in English, so you can pay attention to the way the characters of the movie, be that a real movie, be that an animation, are pronouncing the words in that in that show, and of course the words being used and everything. But of course, one important thing to say is that movies have a very how can I put this, a very crystallized, close quote unquote, vocabulary, meaning there are the dialogues and they're pretty much there. You don't have in movies, unless very exceptional situations where like one character says something and then the other goes like, what you said? I didn't get it, can you say that again? Which pretty much happens in real life all the time, right? We have this all the time. Or even like, I just kind of stuttered here. You don't see character is stuttering, like unless the character is stuttering, unless there's a purpose for this, be the stutter, be the can you say that again, please? But so there's not a spontaneous conversations going on, in movies, and that's fine. That's how things work. All right, I'm not criticizing movies. I love them. That's fine. That's how they're supposed to be, and I hope they keep it up, this way. But when it comes to you interacting with real conversations, it would be also interesting and useful to like use YouTube interviews, real people talking, no matter how different they talk in an interview or in an event or something, that as opposed to the way they would speak at their houses, at their home with their parents. Okay, there is this other step basically, but it's much more real, much way more real than in movies. I would say way more spontaneous. That's the correct word. That's the correct term for this case. All right. So again, if you can talk to someone and if you have friends, perfect. Well, all right. There are websites that allow you to get in contact with people from other countries. Okay, this is a very cool tool. You can exchange information. Maybe there are people that want to learn your language, so you can teach your language, which I assume is Portuguese, to people from these countries who happen to either have English as their first language or know English in a very, very comfortable and high level, right? And that's it. So combine business and pleasure. Okay, that's an old saying or popular expression, if you will, but yet it is very, very useful when it comes to learning a new language. All right, finally, the last tip number 3, and the most controversial, the only controversial in this episode, I believe, that is, make sure you understand the structure of the language. Okay, when I say that, it inevitably leads us to grammar. Okay, grammar is very controversial. All right, there are a lot of teachers saying that you shouldn't learn grammar, or at least shouldn't pay much attention to it. Yeah, me particularly, I believe I am in the kind of in between these extreme opinions, I would say. I think grammar, it's not the most important things. I don't think you should be obsessed about it unless you want to follow a teaching career or something. But yet it's still very, very important. Why? Because, okay, they say before everything, well, when you learn your language growing up as a kid, as from a baby, as a kid, growing up, you don't learn grammar. And that's true. But there's one factor that people saying this tend to ignore. That is, you're learning your first language, all right? When it comes to a second or even third language, it is paramount that you have a solid, quote unquote, means to contrast your language versus the language being learned. All right, like for example, when you learn English, okay, say you're American, say a American person is learning Portuguese. Okay, I've been teaching Americans or English speakers, native English speakers, learning Portuguese. And one of the things that or even Spanish for that matter, or any of the Latin languages, right? Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, Italian, one of the first things that they have to bear in mind is conjugation, all right? So how do you explain conjugation to an English native speaker if we're talking about a language that it practically doesn't exist? Mark my words, it practically doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, conjugation in English. Yeah, we have some tips of conjugation with the be verb, for example, I am, you are, he is, with the third person singular, like he, I I wait, he waits, for example, you know. Okay, but yeah, there's thanks to this little, you know, as I say, tip of conjugation, it's not so hard for an American to learn Portuguese, at least as far as the conjugation is concerned, right? But it's also kind of torturous, I would say, because it is way bigger, you know, way longer. You have to really put a lot of effort into it in order to come into perfection, quote unquote, of course, perfection in quote marks. And on the other way around, like we Brazilians learning English, when we come across phrasal verbs, it is something that like we have to really, it's not something like so alien to us. It doesn't exist, we don't have it in Portuguese, it doesn't exist in Portuguese, but yet it's something not so hard to understand. But it is, yet it is something that we have to put efforts on. You know, we really have to work our butts on basically to get it going, right? It is something that really it's going to be hard forever, right? But that's the point. So when you're learning a language, you have to understand the structure in which the languages are you know, set, right? Does this language have conjugation, you know, conjugation system? How deep is it? How similar to my language, right? Prepositions. How does this language work with preposition? You know, and other more complex subjects, you know, as far as linguistics goes, that I don't really want to bring into here this chat right now, so we don't get any more boring or even longer, right? But that's it. So you have to understand how the language works. You know, just one more example. I've been studying Japanese in the past years, right? And it is a very hard language. And it is like, it doesn't resemble anything before, you know, I study other European languages apart from, of course, English. And it doesn't resemble anything. First of all, the way the words are structured are really bizarre from our perspective, from our point of view, okay? But that's it. You know, I knew that from day one, so I didn't torture myself going like, hey, this phrase doesn't make sense. Or, hey, why in this phrase they use one word, and in this phrase they use a synonym to that word instead of that word, you know? Like, would that be possible? So I have these questions because I forgot to say, I've been learning on my own. You know, I don't have a tutor or a Japanese tutor, which would be something, which would be a doubt that I wouldn't have, you know, if I had a tutor, okay? But anyways, no matter, regardless of, despite of the fact you have, you know, a tutor or you're learning on your own, you know, understanding the structure of the language is fundamental. It's, you know, something that you really have to make sure you keep it on your way while you're learning a new language. And that's number 3. I really hope I kept it simple and objective, okay? Let me hear your opinion. I don't know how it works here, but that's all for this episode. I catch you up in the next one. Bye.